time round, we're going to be talking about Downhill Racer. It's directed by Michael Ritchie and it stars Robert Redford and Gene Hackman. It's released in 1969. It was not a big hit, but it's still around.
So yeah, spoiler alert. We're going to talk about the film in detailed. We're going to ruin the ending.
Yeah, we can't really dance around the plot for an hour without revealing things.
But maybe watch it once and then come back. So, how many times have you seen Downhill Racer? And do you remember your kind of first impressions?
I've seen it 3 times, I think. First time, I actually had to try twice the first time because the previous films I'd seen by Michael Ritchie are quite warm and generous, I'd say, by comparison. And obviously that's not just in terms of, visually, because Downhill Racer is kind of a lot of white on white and stick figures against snow. They're actually quite warm and generous towards the characters, and there's a lot of the character observation is kind of fascinating, and it feels more sort of collage-y. So with the coldness of Downhill Racer, I was initially put off and had to stop after 20 minutes and come back to it another day and watch it all the way through. And once I'd done that, you can appreciate it. It is of a piece with his other films. It is like a little collage of observations that build up.
Sure.
So yeah, it did take me a little while to get into. And then the second time, obviously, on Blu-ray, I was a lot more comfortable with it. And then the third time watching it for this discussion, again, I was able to just look at more details in it.
Yeah, I saw it first a few months ago. I watched the first half with my little boy, and you have to remember Downhill Racer was made in 1969, so it's 50 years old this year. And there's a few, techniques like the speed ramps, which I thought maybe looked a bit hokey, but he was 6 years old when we watched it, and he was jumping up and down in his chair, slapping his legs, really cheering the skiing sections. And I think can you imagine 50 years ago sitting in the cinema and watching that film? It must have been stunning.
Yeah.
And it's only it's 1 year after 2001.
I wonder how much of the experimentation in the editing came from the kind of like the feeling of the time, because there was a lot more visual experimentation, a lot more cutting experimentation. I watched In the Heat of the Night for the first time ever a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah, okay.
And that was cut by Hal Ashby before he became a director. And there's some fairly experimental editing in that. There's a particular little bit at the beginning just of a car coming to a halt, and there's a little speed ramp in the middle of that. And you think, I wonder how much of the style of Downhill Racer was, if not dictated, then sort of subtly influenced by some of the stuff that was going on otherwise. You mentioned 2001.
Yeah.
A big breakthrough for audiences in terms of what you can do, with film cutting and how you can pace the film differently. I'm wondering if any of that, because Downhill Racer is quite, I wouldn't say choppy in the sense that it was clumsy, but it's choppy in the sense that it's quite brittle and fragmented, and a lot of the scenes there's sort of short, truncated scenes that have a little bit of information in, and then you move on to the next. But then within the ski racing, of course, it could be that a lot of it's just to capture the sweet spots in each shot to tell a story.
Yeah, I mean,
to keep it moving.
Some beautiful montages when they're setting up, the world of the high mountains and the detail of downhill racing and the technical aspects of it. From the ticking clocks. There's, I think maybe the second race, there's a really nice sequence of skiers just leaving the gate, cut to the beat of the clock as it counts down the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's just racer after racer bursting through. There's loads of sequences where they just play with time. I think the film is set over the course of 3 years, but there's never any real statement of time passing. Sometimes lots of stuff happens, in 5 minutes, and and then the next thing is you're back 8 months later for the new season, and really that's the only indication of that is an edit.
And it feels quite fragmented as well, because even within the space of scenes that are taking place within the same time period, because it was shot on 35 and 16, and you've also got some fairly obvious stock footage in there occasionally.
Yeah.
It feels even choppier because of that.
It's brave though. I think there's lots of energy to that experimentation, and I think maybe a cynical filmmaker later on in history of cinema might have taken some of that stuff out.
Mm.
But it feels like it's you think he's years ahead of the movie brats of the 70s. So.
Yeah. Oh, there's one thing I want to discuss, which I don't know how to fit into a broader theme. But did you notice? Obviously, there's the obvious one halfway through where you get a slight fake out where you it's where it I'm not going to try and attach it to any kind of grandiose theme. It's just two. One of them was quite a good joke, where the newsmen kind of mistake another skier for Robert Redford.
Yeah, no, that's really nice.
That was really funny because
Yes.
I was looking at it thinking, are you sure?
Yeah,
and then they cut to one side. Oh no, this is actually
Yeah,
him
that's
here.
really nice. Yeah, that's a really good gag with the journalists, and the scene that precedes it is one of the kind of first clashes of personality you get between Hackman and Redford as they're stood at the back of the team minibus, and Chaplet's talking about being positioned better in the team and further up in the launching out of the gate. The earlier he is, the softer the snow, the faster his run, etc. And Hackman says to him, "You finished fourth in one race. Don't expect to be given the world." And he says, "I don't expect to be given anything." And Hackman just says, "Good, get on the bus." And it's a really sort of tense moment. That, there's just this kind of bad atmosphere between them. So I think that's why they just lightened the tone a little bit with that gag straight afterwards. It's a really nice sort of way of keeping you in the film and not pushing you out a little bit.
The other one that I'm still puzzled about, would probably have to dig deeper into supplementary materials or something, is the opening of the film where it opens with another skier who's seriously injured and obviously knocked out of Hackman's team. I had to go back to the film a second time around to check that opening because they do sort of play with the possibility that that's Redford's character. Because you just get passing glimpses of his face, and he's very much the same physical type, same hair, same skin colour and everything. And they always cut away just before you get to his face. Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, are we looking back on this? Is it actually a bleaker film than we think? But no, it's a different character who's knocked out of the team to make room for Redford.
Well, so, I mean, maybe you're onto something there. I don't know if that's maybe the narrative or...
That's something he has to look forward to, or it's just something...
Yeah, but it's kind of the inevitability of downhill skiing is that at some point you're going to come a cropper. They all come off, don't they, at some point or another. And it's how well you sort of bounce through that. We see Creech after he takes a tumble. You think he's going to go when him and Redford have that little race down the slopes where Hackman goes mental at them. And you think Creech is going to come off then and hurt himself, and it'll be Redford's fault, and Hackman will come at him. But they both survive that without. And there's a really nice little moment of connection there between them. No words. They just look at each other with this sort of sly, elite sportsman's grin. Reminds me a bit. Have you seen Le Mans with Steve McQueen?
No.
There's a really nice scene at the end of that where he beats his kind of main rival and just sticks his fingers up at him, and that's it. There's no kind of big talk or anything. It's just like, yeah, fuck you. And so that's really nice because all the way through the film, Redford's looking for a connection to another person, and it's kind of his teammate. But you also see Creech when they're at the Olympics and his legs busted up. He's still there with the team. They're dragging him along, but he's got nothing to do. He just sits in the shed, on his bum, hands on his knees, watching the other team, the rest of the team as they focus and prep for their Olympic downhills. So I think that's the reality of the sport is it is really dangerous, and once you're done, you're done. That's it. You can't. Some of those injuries you can't come back from.
Yeah, I was just wondering about because it was very carefully filmed so as not to reveal that it could potentially be Redford's character, and we could be looking at the rest of the film in flashback.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's just another team member.
Yeah, the guy that played that character is Joe J. Jalbert, who So I checked this. I did a little bit of research on this. It's Joe J. Jalbert, and he captained the University of Washington Alpine ski team for 4 years, and was an athlete competing in the US ski team. And then he was hired as the technical director and Redford's skiing double. He took a cameo role as the skier that breaks his leg at the beginning of the film, allowing Redford to move on to the team. But then he ended up as the cameraman, and he's credited with pioneering that fast handheld technique for filming the sports and the skiing. And in an interview with Criterion, he says, I saw quickly that a toboggan with a cameraman on it chasing a downhill racer that was going 80 miles an hour. It did not work. So I literally just said, guys, give me the camera. And he started skiing alongside the other stunt doubles and then tracking on Redford.
Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it. So he actually after that he was a skier and he worked with Redford on Butch Cassidy and on Jeremiah Johnson, and then he set up like in the 70s set up an extreme sports filmmaking production company, and he did opening sequences for the Winter Olympics and things like that. So he kind of made a career off the back of that, being a superb skier and able to hold a 35mm camera at speed
Really
down the
adept
slopes.
cameraman.
Yeah, that's it. So all of that kind of handheld stuff, when they cut into Redford thundering down the slopes, you're like, my God, that's him.
Yeah.
That's those two guys skiing alongside each other.
Amazing.
Yeah, we should talk about that, the camera techniques for filming the skiing. Like I say, my little boy had like a really kind of genuine reaction to the speed of it, and I think it's really nice that the skiing sequences are shot with that sort of energy, and they save their trump card, that point of view downhill descent at speed. They save that for Redford's first run. So the first time he goes down the slopes, we're in his head, we're in his eyes, and it's really fast. It feels really terrifying. Then I don't know about you, but it certainly made me think I'm probably not cut out for downhill skiing. I don't think that's really in my.
Is Redford the first person that I can't remember it that clearly from the beginning. Is his the first point of view that we get? Because we get a lot of skiers going first, and
we get lots of cool skiing shots.
And then we always cut before we go over the lip of the slope, don't we? And then with Redford's one, we stay with him.
You never see the descent from another skier's point of view. It's only his point of view. You have lots of kind of in tandem and lots of kind of crash zooms and lots of tracking shots, but the first time you see the slopes from a skier's perspective, it's with Redford.
It's quite interesting that it's such a dynamic film visually, because I had always got it in the back of my head that Michael Ritchie came from a documentary film background, but then checking up on it, he didn't. He just came from fairly bog standard episodic TV.
Yeah, but he's a fan of Ken Loach, and he hired Brian Probin and Kevin Sutton, which was the cameraman and soundman from Poor Cow, and Probin also shot Peter Watkins' The War Game.
Oh, okay.
So when you sort of factor that in, he's sculpting a team that can shoot a film that feels that real and authentic.
Pseudo documentary feel.
With this, it's quite interesting because really it is Redford's film.
It's his passion project, wasn't it, for a while?
Yeah, I mean, as I understand the history, it's a novel written in the early '60s and was optioned at Paramount with Robert Evans, and then just shelved for years, and nothing really happened with it. What's the name of the girl that plays Carol?
Camilla Parv or Sparv?
Yeah, that's Robert Evans' ex-wife.
Oh, right. Okay.
So maybe that explains how she ends up in the film. And maybe not. It's gossip, I guess.
And did you, as a sidebar, did you also know Natalie Wood?
Yeah, she was the PA, wasn't she?
She was doing all sorts of stuff on the film.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, and gets herself kind of carefully disguised in crowd scenes.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think she was going out with or married to one of the producers.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Did you know, incidentally, that Sylvester Stallone
I did
cameos in it's not a cameo. He's an extra in the restaurant scene.
Right.
Although I've watched it twice and zoomed in, and it doesn't look like him at all.
Yeah. It should be worth pointing out here that Shane is a Sylvester Stallone obsessive.
No, not obsessive. I'm a respectful fan.
You're a recovering obsessive.
That's it.
So
it was in development at Paramount, and Robert Evans resurrected it for Polanski to try and entice him into doing a film about skiing, which apparently Polanski loves. He's a skier. And then to do Rosemary's Baby, which he later went on, obviously, to obsess over.
Was he lined up to do Rosemary's Baby as well?
It was kind of a 2-picture deal, I think.
Okay.
And then as he, sunk further into Rosemary's Baby, he walked away from Downhill Racer. But Redford was already on board at that stage, and then I think Redford kind of picked it up. And Redford brought in the novelist James Slater, and apparently Slater's starting point for the story was provided by Polanski. Slater hadn't read the book, the novel.
Right.
I skipped it. But Polanski told him that the film should be a modern day High Noon, where the sheriff is killed and someone is called in to replace him. And so, obviously, for the film, the sheriff is the lead racer on the team who breaks his leg, and Chaplet is called in to replace him.
That's tenuous at best.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's history. It's written. It's film history. It's written down.
Right.
On my phone. And then it went into limbo at the studio, and because they sued Redford for walking away from a western called Blue, and then Redford revived Downhill Racer, a golf western, and then brought in Michael Ritchie, and off they went.
I wish somebody had written a book about Michael Ritchie, because it's a really good Hollywood career.
Long, isn't it?
Long.
100 credits or something.
Yeah, and you know, there is very, very, very good at the beginning, and there is very, very, very bad at the end. But I was thinking about it this morning. Even with a string of very successful bad movies later in your career, he survived. You know, he's a very, very sort of late 60s, 70s director, and his 70s movies are 70s movies
Sure.
in character. And then there's like a slight crossover period. But then his 80s movies are extremely 80s movies. Like he made the two Fletch movies with Chevy Chase and The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy.
Did he make The Golden Child?
Yeah, he did.
That's mad.
The Golden Child is a very strange film. I have seen it all the way through, but
Isn't it supposed to be like an Indiana Jones type thing? High Road to China, all of those kind of...
It's not really...
Romancing the Stone?
No, it's like it's a weird... It's Eddie Murphy in LA. I'm pretty sure it's LA. So you've got basically Eddie Murphy being Eddie Murphy in LA, looking like LA as Tony Scott would shoot it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But then it's got some special effects by ILM, and it's got some sort of cod Asian magic in it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like
Big Trouble in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China. And I've seen like a 20-minute chunk of it on TV one night, and it's barely a film.
Oh,
You know, you watch it and you think, this is just a strange assemblage of studio notes, like cut together. It's a really weird thing. But, you know...
I want to see it now.
As a career, you know, he survived.
Mm.
He got right the way through to about the early 90s before he kind of dropped off the map.
Yeah, how old was he then? He must have been like 60, 70.
Yeah, mid-60s, I would say. But yeah, there is no book about Michael Ritchie as far as I can tell. You know, there's books about Hal Ashby. I'm even looking at a book about Alan J. Pakula up on the shelf there.
Okay.
There is a book about him, but there isn't a Michael Ritchie one. It's very odd.
Sounds like you've got a project to start working on.
And I'd like to know
Is he
more
still
about
alive,
him.
Michael Ritchie?
No, he died a little while back. I remember the obituary in Sight and Sound, so it would have been around the 2000s
Oh, yeah.
that he died.
Yeah, I think Michael Ritchie, I've seen obviously Downhill Racer and Prime Cut.
Yeah.
Which was also part of like my Hackman season, sort of ongoing season where I'm trying to see everything that Hackman's done.
That's a lifetime project.
yeah, that's it. But those are the only two Michael Ritchie films that I've seen, and I think I had the same reaction to that as I did watching Downhill Racer, which is that weird sort of middle section where he looks at the male characters, he looks at their relationships, and they don't really have like proper relationships. So
Yeah.
you know, who knows what was going on at the time? But maybe that's more research for your book.
I can tell you're going to go away from the end of this chat laden with, well, certainly with The Candidate and possibly Bad News Bears.
Yeah, I want to see The Candidate actually, because I think Redford intended Downhill Racer to be the first of a trilogy of films about winning in America,
Okay.
or what winning means to Americans at that period. So there's this, The Candidate, which is also about winning, and then they say he sort of loosely rounded out the trilogy with The Natural, you know, his baseball movie.
Ooh.
And he's talked about linking Downhill Racer and The Natural, about the downbeat ending of one and the sort of upbeat fireworks ending of the other.
Yeah. I mean, as a sidebar, I need to watch it again. But I've seen The Natural on television, and then I've read the novel.
Oh yeah, okay.
And they are worlds apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's Bernard Malamud novel.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And
He
it's
did The Tenant. And,
yeah, it's extremely bleak Bernard Malamud novel, and it's Barry Levinson and Redford turned it into this kind of fireworks, optimistic hope and glory thing.
Yeah, USA.
Yeah, I remember reading the novel after seeing the film and thinking what a betrayal the film was.
Yeah, I'd been doing a Gene Hackman season at home. I'd been watching some of his more recent stuff like Unforgiven, Heist, The Replacements, Unforgiven, Split Decisions, and then I started going back looking at Conversation, Prime Cut, and then noticed that he had an early role in Downhill Racer. So yeah, I got the Criterion and looked at that, and yeah, it just blew me away. Actually, I only watched it recently, a few months ago, and watched it again for the podcast.
Yeah, it's a good one for Gene Hackman, isn't it? Because it's just pre-stardom, isn't it? It's like 2 years before French Connection, and he was still at that point. From what I've read recently, he was, because he's obviously quite a difficult person on set, and he was even difficult back in those days. So it's difficult to get him jobs. But there are those films just before he was a huge star after the French Connection, where he's really, really working hard.
Yeah, it's great. You can see, he plays quite a few coaches later in his career, but you can see in this, you can see the kind of the man trying to take control of a team and maintain control, and having, been gifted a star skier that could change his career in an instant, but also to try and curb that guy's individual ambition. You can see the fire in him trying to pull that back.
He's not the coach who kind of gets involved in men's problems and psyches as well. He's quite standoffish, and he works with them at a distance. He doesn't kind of.
He's old school, isn't he? He's cruel.
Yeah.
But not. There's none of that sort of ranting that you get from, I don't know, Al Pacino in Any Given Sunday. There's that scene where he's just sat with Redford in the cafe. It's just the two of them, and he just keeps saying to him, "You're weak." Just under his breath. It's a whisper almost. You're weak. And also at the end, when they're at the Olympics, and you see that Redford's in with a chance of winning, and Hackman doesn't give him any pep talk or any sort of buoyancy. He just says like you can win, like it's just a statement, a quiet statement, and then he just skis off and leaves him alone at the top of the mountain to do the rest of the work.
But as an actor, he does get the biggest, most actory scene in the film. It's quite odd because we'll come back to Redford as a star a bit later on, but it was, Redford is kind of like the elusive character that you can't quite get a handle on throughout the entire film, and you would expect him as the star to get the big scene, but it's actually Hackman gets the big pep talk scene, which is slightly at odds with the rest of the film.
Yeah, but on second view, that pep talk scene, because he's sort of the first time I saw it felt like it was like an outtake, because he's stuttering and tripping over his words, but he's also, the guy trying to tame the wild man in his team. So he's nervous. I think he's intimidated by, Redford's character, and then he starts to take control of the situation, and then there's that really cruel moment, which I think is kind of one of the subtext of the film, which is the class struggle between them, where Hackman drops his trump card and just says to Redford, "You didn't have a real education, did you?" Because all the other skiers, they're Ivy League, they're from Dartmouth, and Hackman's probably from that world. You see how easy he steps from being the coach into the guy trying to raise the money for the team, and able to talk to huge heads of business and do all of that kind of racing capital, whereas Redford, he can ski. That's it.
Yeah, you kind of get the feeling as well that Redford's character in the small town that he's in, because obviously he's a good-looking guy about town. You can tell that from the way that he visits back home and instantly.
Yeah, we all know that guy from school.
Yeah,
who's like too
but
handsome.
he's like the big fish in the small pond, and then he's come into this world that he's completely unfamiliar with, and he's very, very uncomfortable. Particularly when his kind of cultured, beautiful girlfriend kind of outstrips him in every single way.
Yeah, sure.
And leaves him wanting the attention he's used to having from women all through his life. I
also think that with the Redford character, Chaplet, he's an only child. He's from quite a cold. It seems it's just him and his father back home. There's no mother around. he seems quite starved of affection. Talking about the central character, I do feel like some of the reviews I read from the time kind of missed the point of his character. That I think he is likable and he's sensitive and he's quite open, but I think he's closed off to his teammates not because of any sort of aloofness or being cold, but just because of the class difference, because they're basically posh kids and he's a poor kid, and I think that's why he's standing off, because he doesn't want to expose himself as having a lack of education, essentially. There's quite a few lines in there that I think are really nice. It's quite Spartan, the script, but I think everything is well chosen. I love where he's talking to his roommate, the guy he's going to be bunking with for the first act, and he says, so, where do you know one of the other skiers from? And he says, Dartmouth. We were on the ski team together, and he says, I was one of the Olympic hopefuls. I was hopeful, not them. And then he goes into the bathroom, and Redford just sort of covers his face and just says, Dartmouth, like this idea that he's haunted by his own class, I think is maybe it's there. And then the scene after that is the first time the team hit the slopes, and Redford doesn't race. He's given the position so far back in the pecking order that he's given like 88 or something, and he just says, it says to Hackman, like, if I start there, I'm going to be just it's going to be shrapnel, basically.
Yeah, he's going to be skating on ice, isn't he?
Yeah. So he just doesn't turn up, but you don't see that. All you see is him in the cafe with Redford and Hackman in the cafe, and Redford saying, that's not a good position to start from. And then the next scene is him laying on his bed, and his roommate's like, why didn't you race? They don't bother showing any of that stuff. You just know the fact that he's there, and his roommate says, why didn't you race? The next race after that, Redford is bumped up, and the only interaction you get from him and Hackman is Hackman just says, you did so well in the last race, they decided to move you up, and it's just this sarcastic, like, passive aggressive statement. It's like, okay, this is how it's going to be. I guess one of my favourite scenes, which is kind of about this idea of being an individual on a team, is when Creature's talking to the coach's assistant, Alex, and he says, talking about Redford's character, he says, he's not a team player, he's not one for the team. And then Alex just says to him, well, it's not exactly a team sport, is it?
It's weird how that ties into Redford being a loner amongst this sort of team of people who share a common background that he doesn't share.
Exactly.
Maybe he's kind of like more temperamentally suited to the job, to the task, to being a winner, purely because he's a loner and he can't find his feet amongst these people. You can kind of see through that fallacy. It's not really a team, is it? It is about him.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wants to win. Everyone doesn't want the team to win.
There's only one winner, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you see, I don't know much about Formula One, but you see the teams there. A lot of the press is always about how the drivers are pushing to win when the team are pushing for placement of the entire team.
Yeah.
And I guess it's similar to what they're looking at there. And I think there's something interesting about sports being a way for working class people to change their destiny.
Maybe it's a great leveler, because regardless of your background, you have to put in the time and the effort, and you have to be obsessed with it to reach the goals.
Yeah.
And the goals are the same no matter.
Yeah.
And once you've achieved that, the rewards are pretty much the same regardless of where you come from. I mean, obviously you can sort of finesse it and say that if you're from an Ivy League background, you'd be better at sorting out sponsorship deals, but the deals are there and the money is...
You can imagine, like, the Ivy League, the rest of the team, those guys that did go to Dartmouth, they are probably trained lawyers or, they have a career.
They have a fallback.
Exactly, whereas Redford's out on a limb. If he does break his leg, he's done, basically.
He's back, he's taking over his dad's farm, yeah.
Exactly, which is being run into the ground. His dad's just wiring up the chicken coop, isn't he? It's not like he's out there, with cattle going across the American plains. He's got chickens and some space.
A couple of acres and a raggedy building.
But I think there's that really nice scene where he goes to see his dad at the beginning, and we see that his dad is also, you know, a man of few words and, you know, emotionally stunted. But there's one line, and I think, you know, some of the dialogue is really precise, and I don't think it's by accident that it's really pared back and there isn't much discussion. But his dad just has one line which I thought says a lot about the Redford character, and it's where Redford's talking about travelling the world and all the things that he's seen, and his dad's not impressed, but he just kind of says, "Oh, your cousin says thank you for the stamps," which I know it seems like so random, but then you have to imagine Redford's character travelling the world and making sure that he nips into a post office, picks up stamps, collects them for his cousin, puts them in an envelope, sends them back. You know, there's a whole kind of other thing going on which shows that, you know, he is kind of looking for a connection to other people. You know, and they say your cousins are kind of your early best friends, don't they?
It's quite odd. He never struck me. Having had it explained to me, I can see it and see what you mean. But on viewing, he always does strike me as something of a cold fish. And you know, that's a very good explanation for it. And I'll probably not look at the film in the same light again. But he does, and I wonder again if some of that is deliberate in terms of the performance, because it's an anti-star performance, isn't it? It's like a Ryan Gosling performance 50 years ago, where you're doing as little as possible to ingratiate yourself with the audience.
It's hard when you look like that. You know, you kind of, you know, it feels like some beast up on the screen. Then I think, you know, it can come across much worse. But I've noticed in a few reviews from the time that they talked about his vanity, but really I think that's him just preparing himself. It's the morning of his Olympic race. He goes to the mirror, and it's not like he's just staring at himself. He's, you know, he has a shave. He kind of has his ritual, his preparation ritual.
I don't mind a tinge of vanity in there for the character, because
he's an Olympic athlete.
It's not just that. It's because he has been, as I said, like a big fish in his town. He was obviously the best looking guy in high school.
Yeah, right.
And that would be part of his character, just to be very aware of how he looks.
Yeah.
And it's the one thing he's probably still got.
Well, now he's a big fish in a big pond. Like, you know, he's an Olympic athlete.
Yeah, and you would be aware of your appearance. You wouldn't not do that.
Yeah, I'll take that actually. Like 50-50, it's kind of half of it's about his ritual and half of it's about, you know, acknowledging where he is and what he's achieved.
And what he looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always comes across as a lot frustrated, a lot more selfish to me, particularly in the final scene with his girlfriend, where he's felt himself outranked and just responds in the most childish, arrogant way that you can.
I think on second viewing, you know, I think the first time I saw the film, I found it frustrating that the whole of the middle act is this kind of slightly loose relationship that isn't really developing and seems to take place over about an 18-month period. But then on second viewing, it just felt like he's the one that's saying, you know, shouldn't this be moving forward into something? Shouldn't we be getting closer? Like he's after that closeness. He comes to her workplace looking for her. You know, he makes time to spend Christmas with her, and she just fucks off and leaves him alone in the mountains. You know, and I think part of that is that he doesn't have anything to go home to, and he doesn't feel connected to his teammates. So it's kind of he's out there alone basically, and he believes in the connection that he has with her more than she does.
Yeah.
What's quite interesting, the scenes where he's been emotionally shunned by somebody he feels like he's close to. Like, for example, when his dad kind of blanks in, there's a nice scene where he says to his dad, "Oh, you know, the car's still looking good. You know, what about if you knock off early and we'll go into town and have a drink?" So he's trying to connect to his dad. Yeah. And his dad just says the keys are in it if that's what you want. You know, he's not like, "Oh, I don't fancy a beer," or "I've got work to do." He's just like, "Take the car." You know, doesn't care. And so that's the next scene after that is Redford picking up, you know, his local girlfriend and just treating her like dirt. And I think the same thing happens with when he's kind of, he's not spurred by Carol, is he? He sits in her Porsche and she gives him his Christmas present, which is
she's quite happy to carry on her own terms.
Yeah,
and he just feels,
well, he wants something more. I think that's it. You know, he's that's what's interesting for this as a male character. Like, he's desperate for the relationship to evolve into something deeper, even if he doesn't say it. He's trying to will it forwards. He's trying to show.
Do you think there's an element in that scene though where she is slightly portrayed as kind of selfish and a little bit unaware of just anything outside her, because she is effectively kind of just blathering about what she's been doing over Christmas.
Over Christmas, yeah, and her brother was Santa Claus and those kind of things. But I think what she's trying to say is, I don't want anything deeper. Which is traditionally it's the male role. Oh, you're trying to take me away, or whatever. So and then he just hits the horn on the car and shuts her up, and she walks off. It's like they both understand it. But the scene that comes directly after that is him and Creech with their downhill, off-piste race to the bottom, where Redford, they're at the top of the hill, they've finished training, top of the mountain, they've finished training, and Redford just looks at him and says, "Beat you to the bottom." That's it, and then off they go, And then I think that's it, that's the connection that he's been looking for, because then the scene that you see after Creech has his crash and they're in the hospital, and Creech is all kind of, he's in traction, basically. When Redford comes in, there's a really nice connection between them. You feel like, they're I don't know, friends, but they're certainly, on par with each other.
Yeah.
And then Hackman comes in afterwards, and you realise that he's quite cold with Creech. He doesn't have a spiritual connection with him. It's still like coach, skier.
Yeah, he doesn't.
And skier who's like redundant now because he's not going to ski. So he brings him some magazines, pats him on the wrist, And Redford, at least he says to him, I think, you'll get them next season. Or you'll get them next time. And he's like, what, the next Olympics? It's like 4 years away. It's like his window is shut, basically.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of the film is about, very subtly, very coldly, even Redford looking for that connection. And in the end, the person he has that connection with is Hackman.
Do you think Hackman comes from a similar Ivy League background as the rest of the skiers? Because obviously Hackman is always
that's it.
He's always a working class character. He's down to earth and really salty and relatable. I wonder if he isn't just more comfortable with that background because he spent a lot of time in it.
Yeah, I wonder if he isn't like the sort of the scholarship student that kind of goes Ivy League because of his excellence, that ferocity that is innately Hackman, anything he's in, Yeah, so I think he's probably had an Ivy League education, but from like a working class start. His parents probably moved from working class to middle class and were able to just push him through.
Yeah.
Into that world.
On the basis of some sort of scholarship or something. So he's been around these people for decades and is, well, actually not that many decades. You always think of Gene Hackman as
that's it. He always looks 50, doesn't
like
he?
late middle age, but no, he's probably been around them for a good few years and
7 years I think he says he's been coaching at one point when he's chewing Redford out. Yeah, and
at the same time there's no kind of like working class fellowship or anything between him or anyone.
No, that's it. And Hackman never talks about where he's from. You never get any indication of that. It's just how he carries himself and that authority and the cruelness. I think is key to him.
Mm-hmm. I need to know more about Redford. He's one of those people who's. I'm not an actor based film viewer.
Sure,
I don't
sure.
regularly go and see films because it has a certain person in.
Yeah.
It's more sort of behind the scenes. So up until now in my life, it's always been like, you'd only watch maybe 3 Redford movies a decade.
Yeah, I think the only Redford movie I've seen in the cinema was Sneakers.
Me too, up until, I think I've seen something more recently, but yeah, Redford, I have a biography on my wish list to read on holiday at some point in the future, because I'd like to know more about how his career dovetails with a lot of interesting people.
Yeah, when you look at Sundance and all the kind of work he's done to promote film and maintain a kind of integrity to cinema and not just a sort of commercial aspect to it. I think Sundance has always been about celebrating storytellers and filmmakers.
And he's when you look at his IMDb throughout the 70s, which is from 69 onwards was his peak really, there's not that many crowd pleasers in there. You've got Butch Cassidy and you've got The Sting a few years later. Yeah. But a lot of the other ones are sort of like middle ground, Sidney Pollack, social conscience type movies. a lot of them all the way through, and that goes right through until the right up until Out of Africa type period.
Yeah,
So
sure.
for somebody who's maintained a status as a superstar, it's actually quite a good solid filmography.
Yeah, right.
Once I don't know, this is something that I find as I get a bit older. Like once you spend your younger years chasing down the sort of the firebrand filmmakers like your Scorsese's, and if you're going to watch an actor in something, it's a De Niro or a Keitel.
Yeah, they're easy entry points, aren't they?
Yeah.
To break away from like the commercial stuff.
But once you've done that and you get sort of a bit older, you think, well, I quite fancy just watching a Sidney Pollack movie, which does some interesting things without setting the screen on fire.
Yeah, that's it. That's why I'm doing like a long Hackman season.
Yeah,
it's the same sort of principle, just to see an actor burning across the screen.
Yeah.
But also he chose his films well. I think there's a few sellouts there, but essentially he's doing solid work.
Yeah.
I'm just scrolling through Redford's filmography, when you just can't bring anything to mind.
There's lots of sort of like things that you look at and you think that looks mildly like Brubaker and things like that.
I like Brubaker.
I've not seen it.
I really like that. Yeah. It sort of kind of echoes. He did another film. Well, I guess it must have been 2001 because the posters for it were in the back of some of the 9/11 pictures from New York. But he did a film called The Last Castle with James Gandolfini, which is a military prison. There's a riot at a military prison.
All right.
And the poster for it was an inverted Stars and Stripes, Old Glory inverted. And so there's pictures of that with like the dust and the clouds from 9/11 all around them. It's pretty powerful, but I think the film flopped.
We talked about it being quite focused in that it does kind of like there's kind of short abrupt scenes that get to the point and then move on. And kind of when you talk about that, the impression is that they've worked on it and tried to make it and cut it back and tried to make it as pointed as possible.
Yeah, it's surgical, isn't it? Some dialogue.
But at the same time, it does feel loose and it is actually very funny in places. It's got gags.
Oh yeah, there's a scene where he's sat with his dad in the kitchen and he pours himself a glass of water from the tap and takes a sip, but the water's quite yellow, and he says to his dad, "What happened to the water?" And he's like, "It's gone bad." There's those kind of gags, and then
there's a really good one introducing the news reporter, where you cut to a news reporter on screen. He begins his report, which is something you're used to seeing 100 times as like a TV device, and then he fluffs his line and goes back and starts again. And that kind of just clues you into what kind of movie this is. It's kind of it's going to let those loose bits be in there and be a bit more relaxed.
There's another bit where he's talking to his dad, and his dad says, have you won any races? And he says, yeah. And he's like, have you won any money? And he's like, well, and then he starts trying to, explain to his kind of farmer father this idea
about
that you're investing in
and,
your time and your energy into something that will pay off later.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
And we haven't discussed one of the big themes at the end, which is almost like a rug pull at the end. It kind of teases that it's going to pull the rug out from under you, but when he's actually won the race at the end.
Well, yeah, there's that moment where he's got the fastest downhill time, hasn't he?
So far, and he's broken the records, and you assume that that's it, but then obviously there's more people to race.
Yeah,
and
there's
somebody
one more
could,
guy coming, isn't there? Is it the German, I think?
And it looks like he could steal his thunder at the very last moment.
He's catching him, isn't he? He's half a second faster on the turn and half a second quicker here, and then he just like whooshes off, isn't he?
Wipes out at the very end, and you think, it doesn't leave you with an easy win. You're just like, It's always there, but for the grace of God. Yeah.
I mean, it does end with a freeze frame shot of Redford being lifted up by the crowd, so it sort of fits in with the sports movie cliches. Maybe it sets the precedent there.
But yeah, even when it's giving him a victory, it kind of is teasing, snatching it away from him again, and that would.
Precarious victories of a sportsman.
And it's built up how much of a disaster it would be if it went away. There would just be nothing. That would be it.
Yeah.
Now that we know.
Yeah, there's a lovely interview before the final race with Redford talking to the press, and they're like, you're at the Olympics, what are you going to do next? And he just says, like, this is it. Like, it's all about this. It's
interesting that the film doesn't suggest in the way that most sports films do that training and honing will make you a better athlete.
Yeah, sure.
You don't follow much, if any, of their training rituals or anything like
there's
that.
hardly anything in it. There's no kind of big montage sequences of men getting stronger and fitter and faster.
And it does seem that you just kind of, you're there and the opportunity's sort of there, and a lot of it is down to chance. There's a lot's made about, the running order. If you're sort of much later in the day, the snow will be, that's a major factor. The snow will be all kind of iced up and make your run more difficult. There's no suggestion that you train for that in any way. It's just, these things are just, a lot of it's down to chance. And that's really underlined at the end when, even when you've done your best and beaten the records, there's still a chance that somebody else can do better.
That's it. There's somebody coming down the mountain faster than you.
But you don't get the feeling from this. It's not your traditional kind of training film, in that these guys are working towards something and not quite getting it, and then there's another chance and they break through.
Exactly.
It's not that sort of film, is it?
No, there's two, as far as I can remember, two sequences that feature some sort of exercise, and that's when they're jogging around the track and the coach makes Redford go again, which is obviously an instruction from Hackman, just to sort of exert his
authority,
position. And then the second time is when they're just doing those roly-polies and parallel bars in there,
which is a bit sort of show pony anyway, isn't it?
But that's about raising finance. That's what it's there for. So that's what he's talking about at the same time, these ambassadors of the American way of life, and then you see star jumps.
But for a film, for a sport that, watching the sport, watching people ski, have to be in absolute peak physical condition. I mean, you have to be like a machine, and you also have to be extremely quick-witted and agile, and your decision making has to be spot on. You don't get the sense of that being trained or honed. You just feel that these are kind of peak athletes, and the chances are what they are.
Yeah, even at the end of the last race, where Robert Redford's put in like his best time, and he thunders down the slopes and gets to the end, and then you see it flash across the screen very quickly, his time, but they don't say, there's nothing in the voiceover that says this is the best time. It's only the crowd's reaction as they sort of swamp him. But what's really nice in that moment is just as the crowd reach him, and it's a blink or you miss it moment, but he collapses, he drops down to the snow, and then they sort of pick him back up. So like he's really exhausted himself on that run. And then all I've got, my last note is, I think that's my last note, shopping at Asda, is just that moment at the end where, let's say that the film is about Redford's journey for a human connection. He's looking for something that he doesn't get at home, and he doesn't get it in America, and he doesn't seem to be finding it from his European lady friend. And he's kind of lost it with Creech, because Creech is out and injured, and he's just left with Hackman. It's like,
Or there's this kind of, possibly there's that kind of momentary connection. Doesn't he make eye contact with the guy who could have beaten his time?
Yeah, the guy that crashes on
the guy that crashes at the very end looks like it could have, and there's sort of that connection there. So I wonder if there's kind of the only connections he's going to make is these kind of fleeting moments of camaraderie with people who are actually, the competition.
Yeah, that's it. They're rivals in some way or another.
And it's kind of doomed camaraderie anyway, because it can't, there's only one winner.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. One thing we haven't talked about is the poster.
I almost bought that poster yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday?
Yeah, there's one on eBay which is near mint, and it's in the outer reaches of affordable for me, but I thought it was unwise at the moment. But yeah, it's one of the greatest posters of all time.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
I honestly think that poster, because it is quite an obscure film. It's never been a hit. It's not that widely known. I think that poster contributes to at least 30% of its fame.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely a poster that I'd seen before I even really knew what the film was about. It's minimal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So what are your kind of closing thoughts on Downhill Racer and its position in cinematic history? It feels like it's sort of drifted away, like people don't really talk about it. I've never heard it come up in conversation.
No,
I've never heard anybody talking about Downhill Racer. I stumbled across it looking through Hackman films.
Yeah, I knew it. I only came across it because I was looking up Michael Ritchie, and it was his first film. And then Criterion brought it out. And I would say, Criterion bringing it out has kept it alive in the world
Yeah.
for another 10 years. But it is, I mean, it's a terrific film, but it is a minor film that, has kind of disappeared a bit. And I don't think it'll ever be that widely discussed, which is why it's nice to talk about it now.
But I'd put it on a par with, I don't know, movies like Taxi Driver. It feels like it's that kind of budget range, that kind of characterization, that sort of detail.
Yeah, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have the pulpy sort of.
It's not as dirty.
No, it's not as dirty. It doesn't have a hook, really, does it? It's kind of it would be a hard sell. Whereas Taxi Driver, I mean, the thing that attracted me to the Taxi Driver when I was 15, 16 is that I'd heard about it. It was dead violent.
Yeah,
that's what made me seek it out, and from there that launched me into
Well, and I guess Taxi Driver. You never think of it being particularly wordy, but there is a lot of talking and voiceover, and it's kind of it's not particularly ambiguous.
No.
There's a few. What's the end all about?
No, it's unusually and richly made, but it is at the same time propelling you in one direction, isn't it? Whereas this is just kind of more, by comparison, is sort of more free-flowing observations and snippets. And
I think it kind of demands an engagement from the viewer and maybe a second viewing at least.
Yes.
Which I think in the first viewing is quite tricky, especially with that sort of weird middle act where all that adrenaline that you get from the skiing just stops, and you spend your time raising finance, talking about skis and stiffness of skis, and have a non-relationship that doesn't go anywhere. It's a very weird middle act on first viewing.
So yeah, I think it's I wouldn't say it's dropped off the radar, because I don't think it was ever fully on the radar.
No, it flopped when it came out.
Yeah, but
it was dwarfed by Butch Cassidy.
But I'm glad it's still alive.